Commander Zethkar of the Vortanian Imperial Fleet had witnessed countless battles across 17 star systems. His crystalline exoskeleton bore the scars of plasma burns and kinetic impacts from skirmishes with the savage Krellian horde, the mechanical precision of the synthetic collective, and the psychic assaults of the ethereal dominion. Each enemy had their own particular brand of terror, but none had prepared him for what he was about to experience alongside humanity. The emergency transmission had arrived 3 cycles ago, crackling through subspace with desperate urgency. The outer rim colony of New Thessia was under siege by the Devourers, a nightmare species that consumed not just flesh, but the very essence of consciousness itself. The colony's population of 2 million souls faced complete annihilation within days. The Galactic Council had assembled the largest relief fleet in recorded history, drawing ships from every member species of the Alliance. Standing in the briefing chamber aboard the flagship Eternal Vigilance, Zethkar studied the holographic display showing the assembled armada. 347 vessels from 23 different species hung in the void, their varied designs reflecting the diversity of galactic civilization. Sleek Altarian destroyers with their bio-neural hulls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Massive Thorgrim dreadnoughts bristled with kinetic cannons that could crack moons. The delicate, almost gossamer ships of the Serenity Collective hummed with harmonic resonance weapons that could shatter matter at the molecular level. And then there were the human ships. Zethkar's secondary heart skipped as he observed the human contribution to the fleet. Only 12 vessels, laughably small compared to the grand armadas of other species. Their ships appeared crude, angular things of steel and ceramic composites, lacking the elegant curves of Vortanian bioships or the crystalline beauty of Zephyrian constructs. To untrained eyes, they looked primitive, almost barbaric in their utilitarian design. But Zethkar had read the classified reports. He knew what those unremarkable vessels contained. Admiral Korethnos, the fleet commander, activated the central display. The situation on New Thessia has deteriorated beyond all projections. His voice resonated through the chamber's universal translators. Devourer forces have established 7 hive clusters across the planet's surface. Our intelligence estimates place their numbers at over 40 million individual organisms, supported by 3 broodmothers and a confirmed Alpha Empress. Gasps and chittering sounds of dismay echoed through the gathered officers. Even hardened veterans felt their courage waver at such numbers. The Devourers were not merely predators. They were an existential threat to all sentient life. Each individual organism stood 3 meters tall, with razor-sharp appendages that could slice through battle armor like tissue paper. Their acidic blood could eat through ship hulls, and their psychic screams could drive experienced warriors to madness. The planetary defense grid fell 6 days ago, Korethnos continued. Long-range scans indicate that civilian populations have been herded into concentration areas. The Devourers are farming them, keeping them alive while slowly draining their neural energy to feed the broodmothers. Zethkar's mandibles clicked in horror. The Devourers didn't just kill. They tortured entire populations, keeping them conscious and aware, while slowly consuming their minds over weeks or months. It was a fate worse than any death imaginable. Our mission parameters are clear. The Admiral's voice hardened. We break through their orbital defenses, establish landing zones, and evacuate as many survivors as possible. Secondary objective is the destruction of all Devourer hive structures to prevent them from using New Thessia as a breeding ground for expansion into the inner systems, Captain. Torres of the Human Expeditionary Force stepped forward. She was unremarkable by human standards. Average height, graying hair, wearing a simple blue uniform devoid of the ornate decorations favored by other species. Yet something in her pale blue eyes made even the largest warriors in the room unconsciously step back. Admiral, with respect, evacuation shouldn't be our primary objective, she said, her voice carrying an odd calmness that sent chills down Zethkar's spinal column. We're not here to run away with whatever scraps we can save. We're here to exterminate every last one of those things and take our world back. The briefing chamber fell silent. Other species viewed the Devourers as a natural disaster to be survived and contained. The idea of actually hunting them to extinction seemed not just impossible, but insane. Captain Torres, Admiral Korethnos spoke carefully. The numerical superiority of the enemy forces makes complete elimination. Unlikely. Our projections suggest a 97% casualty rate for ground. Operations lasting more than 6 hours. Torres smiled, and Zethkar felt his blood temperature drop several degrees. There was something predatory in that expression, something that spoke to instincts buried deep in the evolutionary memory of every species present. "Admiral, you're thinking about this wrong," she replied. "You're planning to fight the Devourers. We're planning to hunt them." The distinction seemed meaningless to most of the assembled officers, but Zethkar began to understand. He had studied human history during their integration into the Galactic Alliance. Humanity was unique among spacefaring species. They had evolved not as prey animals who developed intelligence to hide from predators, but as persistence hunters who had climbed to the top of their food, chained through relentless pursuit and tool use. Every other species in the Alliance had developed faster than light, traveled to escape their homeworld's limitations and explore the cosmos. Humans had developed it to hunt across the galaxy. "The enemy has numerical superiority in defensive positions," Torres continued, activating her own tactical display. "But they're not warriors, they're parasites. They've never faced a species that hunts its food instead of gathering it. They've never encountered prey that fights back with planning, coordination, and the absolute refusal to give up." The human tactical display showed something that made Zethkar's primary heart skip. Instead of the standard assault patterns used by Alliance forces, direct attacks designed to minimize casualties and achieve objectives with maximum efficiency, the human plan resembled something else entirely. It looked like a web, with multiple interconnected strike points designed not just to achieve victory, but to systematically dismantle the enemy's ability to exist. "We're not going to New Thessia to save civilians," Captain Torres announced to the stunned gathering. "We're going there to teach the Devourers what it means to be hunted by humanity." As the briefing concluded and officers began returning to their ships, Zethkar found himself both terrified and fascinated. He had volunteered to serve as liaison aboard the human flagship Indomitable, believing his experience with various combat situations would prove valuable. Now, as he prepared to transfer to the human vessel, he realized he was about to witness something unprecedented in galactic history. For the first time, the Devourers were about to discover what true horror looked like. The interior of the human ship Indomitable assaulted Zethkar's senses in ways he hadn't anticipated. Unlike the sterile, climate-controlled environments of Vortanian vessels or the harmonically balanced atmospheres of other Alliance ships, the human ship thrummed with raw energy. The corridors were narrower than he was accustomed to, forcing the naturally tall Vortanian to duck beneath bulkheads designed for human proportions. But it was the crew that truly unsettled him. Every human aboard the Indomitable moved with a purpose that bordered on predatory. Their eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, not with the nervous vigilance of prey animals, but with the calculating assessment of apex predators, evaluating potential threats and opportunities. When they spoke, it was in clipped, efficient sentences that conveyed maximum information with minimal waste. Even their casual conversations carried an undercurrent of violence barely held in check. "Commander Zethkar, welcome aboard," Captain Torres greeted him as he arrived on the bridge. The command center was cramped compared to Vortanian standards, with crew stations positioned so close together that the operators could physically touch each other. It took Zethkar several moments to realize this wasn't a design flaw. It was intentional. Human crews operated as a single organism, with each member constantly aware of their companion's actions and status. "Thank you for having me, Captain," Zethkar replied, his voice translator adding harmonic undertones to convey respect. "I must admit I'm curious about your tactical preparations. The other species are following standard Alliance protocols for Devourer engagement. Maximum range combat, minimal ground exposure, extraction-focused operations." Torres nodded toward the main display, which showed the human fleet formation. Instead of the defensive sphere favored by most Alliance tacticians, the human ships had arranged themselves in what appeared to be a hunting pack formation, loose enough to avoid concentrated fire, tight enough to provide mutual support, with clear roles for each vessel. "Standard protocols assume the Devourers are a military force," she explained. "They're not. They're a plague. You don't negotiate with a plague, you don't contain it, and you sure as hell don't let it spread because you're worried about casualties. You burn it out completely, or it comes back stronger." Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, the ship's tactical officer, looked up from her station. Her hands moved across holographic controls with fluid precision, constantly adjusting firing solutions and attack vectors. Commander Zethkar, are you familiar with Earth's history regarding parasitic species? Zethkar's knowledge of human history was extensive, but focused primarily on their military conflicts. I'm afraid biological sciences are not my area of expertise. Humans eliminated smallpox from our homeworld, Chen continued, her fingers never pausing in their work. Complete extinction. We didn't just treat the symptoms or contain outbreaks, we hunted down every last viral particle and destroyed it. The devourers are just another disease that needs to be cured. The casual way she discussed genocide made Zethkar's secondary stomachs churn. Other species fought wars for territory, resources, or ideology. Humans spoke about the complete elimination of their enemies with the same tone most species used to discuss lunch preferences. Incoming. Transmission from the fleet, announced Ensign Rodriguez from the communication station. All ships are reporting ready status for final approach to New Thessia. The main display shifted to show the combined fleet as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Thessia system. What greeted them was worse than even the most pessimistic intelligence reports had suggested. The planet itself appeared to be dying. Where once green continents and blue oceans had created a jewel of galactic civilization, now twisted organic growths covered entire landmasses. Massive biomechanical structures rose from the surface like cancerous tumors, pulsing with sickly bioluminescence. The orbital space around the planet swarmed with devourer void swimmers, living creatures the size of frigates that could survive in vacuum and deliver devastating bioplasma attacks. Sweet mother of Captain. Torres caught herself before completing the expletive. Intelligence estimated 3 hive clusters. I count at least 12 major structures, plus those orbital defenders. The Alliance fleet began standard dispersal patterns, preparing for long-range engagement to thin the enemy numbers before attempting planetary approach. The massive Thorgrim dreadnoughts powered up their main guns, while Altarian bioships began charging their neural disruptors. The human ships did something different. All human vessels. This is indomitable, Torres broadcast on the tactical frequency. Implement Hunting Pack Protocol 7. Remember, we're not here to win a battle. We're here to kill every last one of these things. Zethkar watched in fascination and growing horror as the human fleet separated into 3 groups. The first group, consisting of their heaviest vessels, accelerated directly toward the planet at maximum thrust. Instead of maintaining safe distances for long-range combat, they were charging straight into the heart of the Devourer defensive grid. Captain, Zethkar ventured, this appears to be extremely aggressive. The probability of survival for ships that close to enemy formations is irrelevant. Torres cut him off. Survival isn't the objective. Killing everything that moves is the objective. If we survive while doing it, that's a bonus. The second group of human ships had begun a wide flanking maneuver, moving to positions that would put them behind the orbital defenders. But instead of the standard precision bombing runs favored by Alliance forces, their attack pattern suggested something far more systematic. Chen, give our Vortanian friend a breakdown of Pack Protocol 7, Torres ordered. The tactical officer turned toward Zethkar, her expression carrying the same predatory intensity he had noticed in every human aboard the ship. Standard Alliance doctrine focuses on achieving military objectives with acceptable losses. We've thrown that out completely. Protocol 7 is based on how human ancestors hunted mammoth herds on Earth. She activated a secondary display showing the tactical breakdown. Group 1 attacks directly, forcing the enemy to focus their attention and defensive resources. They'll take heavy casualties, but their job isn't to survive. It's to make the enemy think they know what we're doing. The display shifted to show the flanking group. Group 2 circles around to attack from behind, not to achieve tactical surprise, but to drive the enemy toward Group 3. Zethkar looked for the third group on the display but couldn't locate them. Where is Group 3? Already on the planet, Torres replied with a cold smile. They went in during the initial confusion, using stealth insertion pods. Their mission is simple: get to the surface and start killing devourers. All of them. The space battle is just to keep the enemy distracted while our ground teams do the real work. The implications hit Zethkar like a physical blow. While other species were preparing for a conventional military engagement, humans had already committed troops to the surface. Not to secure objectives or rescue civilians, but to begin what amounted to an extermination campaign. But the civilian population, he protested. Surely rescue operations take priority over. The best way to save the civilians is to kill everything that's trying to eat them, Torres interrupted. We're not playing defense anymore, Commander. We're not managing the threat or containing the damage. We're going hunting. As if to emphasize her point, the first wave of human ships reached the outer perimeter of Devourer defenses. Instead of the careful, measured exchanges typical of space combat, what followed was pure carnage. Human vessels ignored their own defensive systems, instead concentrating all power on weapons and engines. They traded armor for firepower, life support redundancy for ammunition storage, and tactical flexibility for pure murderous efficiency. Zethkar watched in stunned silence as human ships deliberately rammed Devourer void swimmers, using their own hulls as weapons, while their crews continued firing until the moment of impact. It wasn't suicide. It was calculated savagery designed to inflict maximum damage regardless of personal cost. This is insane, he whispered, not caring if the humans heard him. No, Captain Torres replied, her eyes never leaving the tactical display as human ships died by the dozen, while tearing apart Devourer formations. This is what we do to species that threaten our own. The Devourers made one critical mistake, Commander. What mistake? They assumed we'd fight them like a military force. Instead, they're about to learn what it's like to be hunted by a species that spent 1,000,000 years perfecting the art of killing everything that stood in our way. The first reports from the human ground teams arrived 18 hours after the initial assault, transmitted through quantum-encrypted channels that bypassed Devourer biointerference. Zethkar found himself in the Indomitable's war room, surrounded by human officers who received updates about their comrades with the same clinical detachment they might use to discuss weather patterns. Raptor team has established a forward operating base in Sector 7, reported Major Williams, the ship's Marine commander. They've eliminated 2 minor hive clusters and are moving toward the primary breeding ground in the northern continent. Captain Torres nodded, making notes on her tactical pad. Casualties? 43% KIA, 17% wounded but operational, Williams replied without emotion. Still within acceptable parameters for Phase 1 operations. Zethkar's translator struggled with the human term, acceptable parameters. In Vortanian military doctrine, losses exceeding 15% constituted a tactical disaster requiring immediate withdrawal and reassessment. The humans were treating 60% casualties as routine. What about civilian rescue operations? Zethkar asked, hoping to steer the conversation towards something resembling traditional military objectives. The war room fell silent. Every human turned to look at him with expressions that ranged from confusion to pity. It was Major Williams who finally answered. Commander, we found the civilian holding areas in Sector 3. The Devourers had been farming them for 6 weeks. Most had been partially consumed. Their neural tissue was being slowly extracted while keeping them conscious. The lucky ones were already dead. The Major's voice remained steady, but Zethkar noticed the slight tremor in his hands as he spoke. Raptor team terminated their suffering and moved on to the next objective. There's nothing left to rescue, sir. There's only killing left to do. The brutal reality hit Zethkar like a physical blow. While the Alliance fleet had spent days organizing their relief mission, the Devourers had been systematically torturing the entire population of New Thessia. The humans hadn't come to rescue anyone. They had come to avenge them. Ghost Team reports successful infiltration of Hive Cluster Delta, continued Williams, moving through his status updates with methodical precision. They've planted seismic charges in the primary support structures and are moving to secondary objectives. Estimated time to detonation, 6 hours. Excellent, Torres replied. Have them maintain radio silence until extraction. What's the status on the Alpha Empress? Williams consulted his tactical display. Phoenix team has located the primary nest. The Alpha Empress is larger than intelligence suggested. Current estimates put her at roughly the size of a starship cruiser, with her entire lower body embedded in the planetary crust. She's been using New Thessia's core minerals to enhance her breeding capabilities. The display showed a grainy image captured by Phoenix team's reconnaissance drones. The Alpha Empress was a nightmare of organic architecture. a living mountain of flesh and chitin that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. Hundreds of smaller devourers moved across her surface like antibodies, while massive egg sacs the size of buildings hung from her flanks like obscene fruit. She's been turning the entire planet into an incubation chamber, Williams continued. Our xenobiologists estimate she could produce upward of 10 million offspring within the next breeding cycle. If she's allowed to mature those eggs, he didn't need to finish the sentence. 10 million devourers would be enough to overrun half the Alliance's outer rim territories. New Thessia wasn't just a tragedy, it was a potential extinction event for galactic civilization. Phoenix team is requesting permission to implement Scorched Earth Protocol, Williams added quietly. The war room fell silent again. Zethkar had never heard the term, but something in the way the human said it made his scales itch with anticipation. Negative, Torres replied after a long moment. Scorched Earth is for last resort only. Have them implement Exterminator Protocol instead. Aye, Captain. Transmitting new orders now. Zethkar couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. What is Exterminator Protocol? Major Williams glanced at Captain Torres, who nodded permission to explain. Commander, how familiar are you with Earth's historical pest control methods? I'm afraid I don't understand the relevance. On Earth, when humans encountered insect species that threatened our food supplies or living spaces, we developed systematic methods for eliminating entire populations. Exterminator Protocol applies those same principles to hostile alien species. Williams activated a holographic display showing the human ground team's positions across New Thessia's surface. Instead of the random combat operations Zethkar had expected, the human forces were moving in carefully coordinated patterns that formed an ever-tightening noose around devourer population centers. Step 1. Locate all breeding sites and egg repositories. Step 2. Introduce targeted toxins that specifically affect devourer biochemistry while leaving other life forms unharmed. Step 3. Systematically destroy all adults, juveniles, and eggs to prevent regeneration. The clinical efficiency of it was breathtaking and terrifying. You're talking about complete genocide of an entire species? Yes, Torres replied without hesitation. That's exactly what we're talking about. The Devourers aren't an enemy military force, Commander. They're a plague. The only appropriate response to a plague is complete eradication. A new voice crackled over the communication system. Rough, exhausted, but carrying an undercurrent of grim satisfaction. Indomitable, this is Phoenix Team Leader. We're in position at the Alpha Empress's nest. You need to see this. The main display shifted to show a live feed from Phoenix Team's location. The scale of the Alpha Empress was even more horrifying in real-time footage. She stretched across nearly a kilometer of landscape, her massive bulk partially submerged in what had once been New Thessia's capital city. The buildings and infrastructure had been incorporated into her body, creating a fusion of organic and artificial architecture that pulsed with bioluminescent veins. But it was what surrounded her that made Zethkar's blood run cold. Hundreds of thousands of smaller devourers moved in complex patterns around their queen. But they weren't just soldiers or workers. Many of them wore pieces of human clothing or carried fragments of personal belongings. They had incorporated elements of their victims into their own bodies, creating grotesque parodies of the people they had consumed. Phoenix Leader, are you seeing evidence of neural absorption? Torres asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. Affirmative, Indomitable. The Devourers aren't just killing people. They're stealing their memories, their personalities, their identities. We're watching them wear our dead-like costumes. The implications were staggering. The Devourers hadn't just murdered the population of New Thessia, they had stolen their very souls, incorporating human consciousness into their own collective identity. It was a violation that transcended physical death and entered realms of horror that most species couldn't even comprehend. Phoenix Leader, implement Exterminator Protocol immediately, Torres ordered. I want that thing and everything around it dead within the hour. Copy that, Indomitable. Beginning final approach now. The display showed Phoenix Team moving toward the Alpha Empress with equipment that Zethkar didn't recognize. Instead of conventional weapons, they carried devices that looked more like scientific instruments, biowarfare delivery systems designed specifically for devourer physiology. What are those weapons? He asked. Retroviral bombs, Major Williams explained. They target the specific genetic sequences that allow devourers to process neural tissue. Once infected, The creatures experience rapid cellular breakdown while maintaining full consciousness. It's designed to cause maximum suffering before death. Zethkar stared at the human officer in shock. That's torture on a biological level. Yes, Williams replied calmly. That's the point. We want them to suffer the way they made our people suffer. We want every devourer in the galaxy to understand that attacking humanity means experiencing horrors they can't even imagine. As Phoenix Team deployed their biological weapons, Zethkar realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Other species fought wars to achieve political or territorial objectives. Humans fought wars to send messages that would echo across space and time. Warnings carved in the bones of their enemies that some lines should never be crossed. The Devourers had crossed one of those lines. Now they were about to learn what true horror looked like when humanity decided to teach it to them. The retroviral attack began at 347 ship time, and Zethkar watched in fascinated horror as humanity's biological weapon tore through the Alpha Empress and her brood with systematic precision. The virus spread through the Devourer collective consciousness like wildfire, transmitted through the very neural networks they used to coordinate their attacks on sentient species. On the main display, the massive form of the Alpha Empress convulsed as the engineered virus attacked her cellular structure. But this wasn't a quick death. The retrovirus was designed to shut down specific biological functions while leaving pain receptors fully active. The creature that had tortured millions of innocent civilians was now experiencing agony on a scale that defied comprehension. Phoenix Team reports successful deployment of all bioweapons, Major Williams announced. The virus is spreading through the local devourer population faster than projected. Estimated time to complete regional extinction, 14 hours. Captain Torres nodded grimly. What about the other hive clusters? Raptor Team has finished seeding Clusters Alpha through Charlie with the virus. Ghost Team reports successful elimination of Cluster Delta through conventional explosives. They wanted to save some bioweapons for the deep nests. Williams paused. Commander Rodriguez is requesting permission to begin Phase 2 operations. Granted. Tell Rodriguez that I want every egg, every larva, and every trace of devourer genetic material on this planet completely eliminated. No survivors, no samples for scientific study, no possibility of regeneration. Zethkar listened to this exchange with growing unease. The systematic thoroughness of the human approach was unlike anything in his military experience. Captain, surely some specimens should be preserved for scientific research. Understanding devourer biology could help us defend against future incursions. The humans in the war room turned to stare at him with expressions of barely controlled outrage. It was Captain Torres who finally responded, her voice carrying a cold fury that made Zethkar instinctively step backward. Commander, let me make something crystal clear. We're not studying these things. We're not preserving samples. We're not leaving anything behind that could potentially regenerate or evolve into a future threat. The Devourers made the mistake of trying to turn human beings into food. Now we're going to teach the entire galaxy what happens to species that make that particular error in judgment. A new communication channel crackled to life, broadcasting on the frequency used by Phoenix Team. But instead of human voices, what emerged was something that made every species in the war room recoil in primal terror. The Alpha Empress was screaming, not the simple vocalizations of a dying animal, but complex, modulated sounds that carried meaning across species barriers. Through her neural absorption of human victims, she had learned enough about galactic languages to communicate her agony in terms that everyone could understand. Please. The voice was a horrible fusion of human speech patterns and devourer harmonics. Stop this. The pain? We did not understand. We thought you were food. We did not know you could make us feel this. The humans listened to the creature's pleas with expressions of cold satisfaction. None of them showed any inclination to end her suffering more quickly. Phoenix Leader, are you monitoring this transmission? Torres asked. Affirmative, Indomitable. The Alpha Empress is attempting to communicate. She's using neural patterns absorbed from human victims to form speech. Can she understand our responses? We believe so, Captain. The absorbed human memories include linguistic capabilities. Torres activated the direct communication channel. When she spoke, her voice carried no mercy, no compassion, no possibility of negotiation. Alpha Empress, this is Captain Torres of the Human Expeditionary Force. You are experiencing approximately 1% of the agony you inflicted on the people of New Thessia. Your suffering will continue for the next 13 hours and 47 minutes, at which point you and every member of your species on this planet will be dead. The creature's response was a sound that transcended language, pure, undiluted terror-given voice. We will leave. We will never return to human space. Please, mercy. There is no mercy, Torres replied. There is only the lesson you're about to teach every hostile species in the galaxy. When you prey on humanity, we don't just fight back. We hunt you to extinction and make sure your death serves as a warning to anything else that might consider us food. Zethkar found himself caught between admiration and horror at the psychological warfare aspect of the operation. The humans weren't just eliminating a threat. They were creating a legend that would spread through galactic civilization like ripples in a pond. Every species would hear about what happened to the Devourers, and they would understand that humanity was not just another prey species to be harvested. Commander, Major Williams called from his station. We're receiving multiple transmissions from other Alliance vessels. They're concerned about the methods being employed, Torres sighed. Put Admiral Korethnos through. The communication channel shifted to show the Altarian fleet commander, his bioluminescent patches flickering with patterns that Zethkar recognized as extreme agitation. Captain Torres, our sensors are detecting massive biological contamination across New Thessia's surface. What exactly are your ground teams deploying? Targeted retroviruses designed to eliminate devourer cellular function while maximizing pain response, Torres replied matter-of-factly. It's a humane method compared to what they did to our people. Captain, this appears to be biological warfare on a planetary scale. The Alliance has strict protocols regarding weapons of mass destruction. Torres's expression hardened. Admiral, with all due respect, the Alliance protocols were written by species that had never encountered a threat like the Devourers. Your protocols assume the enemy can be reasoned with, negotiated with, or contained. These things can't be any of those. They can only be exterminated. But surely there are more. Conventional approaches that don't involve the complete extinction of an entire species? Admiral, let me ask you a question. If the Devourers had invaded Altair Prime and turned your population into conscious livestock, while slowly consuming their neural tissue over a period of weeks, what would you want done to them? The communication channel fell silent for a long moment. When Admiral Korethnos finally responded, his bioluminescent patterns had shifted to colors that indicated deep contemplation. I see your point, Captain. Continue with your operations. As the transmission ended, Zethkar realized that he had just witnessed a fundamental shift in galactic military thinking. The Alliance had always operated under the assumption that all conflicts could be resolved through diplomacy. Superior technology or overwhelming force applied with precision and restraint. Humanity had just demonstrated that some conflicts could only be resolved through the complete and utter destruction of one side or the other. Status report from all ground teams, Williams announced. The retrovirus is spreading beyond the initial target zones. Local devourer populations are experiencing complete cellular breakdown. We're detecting no signs of immunity or adaptation. On the tactical display, red dots representing devourer life signs began winking out across New Thessia's surface. Not gradually, as would be expected from conventional weapons, but in cascading waves as the engineered virus spread through their collective nervous system. Time to planetary sterilization, 11 hours, 32 minutes, Williams continued. All human teams are maintaining safe distances from contaminated zones. No friendly casualties from biological weapons deployment. Torres nodded approvingly. Any signs of devourer evacuation attempts? Negative, Captain. The virus appears to have disrupted their ability to coordinate escape efforts. Individual survivors are too damaged to operate spacecraft or communicate with off-world devourer forces. It was then that Zethkar understood the true genius of the human approach. They hadn't just created a weapon that killed devourers, they had created a weapon that prevented the species from learning, from the experience or warning others about human capabilities. Any devourers who survived the assault on New Thessia would be so biologically compromised that they couldn't effectively communicate the details of their defeat. The legend of human ruthlessness would spread through galactic civilization, but the actual methods and capabilities would remain mysterious and therefore more terrifying. Captain, he said quietly, I'm beginning to understand why your species is feared by others in the Alliance. Torres turned to look at him, and for the first time since the operation began, her expression showed something approaching compassion. Commander, we're not feared because we're stronger or more advanced than other species. We're feared because when someone threatens our survival, we don't just defend ourselves. We make sure the threat can never happen again, and we make the process of elimination visible enough that anyone else considering similar actions will think very carefully about the consequences. Outside the ship, the dying screams of the Alpha Empress continued to echo across New Thessia, a message that would soon reach every corner of the galaxy. The final phase of the extermination began at dawn on New Thessia, though the planet's sun struggled to penetrate the toxic clouds that now covered most of the atmosphere. Zethkar stood in the observation deck of the Indomitable, watching as human teams methodically swept through the dying landscape below, ensuring that no trace of devourer life remained. The retrovirus had done its work with terrifying efficiency. Across the planet's surface, the massive hive structures that had once pulsed with malevolent life now stood as silent monuments to extinct horror. The Alpha Empress had finally stopped screaming 6 hours ago, her massive form now a decaying mountain of flesh that would serve as a landmark visible from orbit. But the humans weren't satisfied with mere death. They were implementing what Major Williams had termed total biological sterilization, the complete elimination of any organic matter that might carry devourer genetic information. Flame units are reporting 97% completion of primary burn operations, Williams announced from his position at the tactical station. All identified devourer biomass has been reduced to sterile ash. Teams are now conducting deep penetration sweeps to locate any subsurface egg chambers. Captain Torres nodded approvingly. What about the ocean zones? Depth charges containing concentrated retrovirus have been deployed at all suspected underwater hive locations. Marine reconnaissance teams report no signs of surviving aquatic devourers. The virus appears to be equally effective in maritime environments. Through the observation deck's reinforced windows, Zethkar could see the aftermath of humanity's biological warfare. Massive pillars of smoke rose from burning devourer hive structures, while specialized human vessels methodically sprayed the planet's surface with what appeared to be industrial-grade sterilization compounds. Commander, a new voice spoke behind him. Zethkar turned to see Dr. Sarah Hassan, the Indomitable's chief xenobiologist, approaching with a datapad in her hands. I thought you might want to see the final casualty reports. Zethkar accepted the pad with trembling claws. The numbers were staggering in their completeness. Estimated devourer population on New Thessia at start of operation, 47.3 million individual organisms. Current devourer population, 0. Projected probability of species regeneration from surviving genetic material, 0. Human casualties during extermination operations, 1847 killed in action, 231 wounded. These numbers, Zethkar said quietly, represent the complete extinction of an entire branch of devourer evolution. You've eliminated millions of years of biological development in less than 2 days. Dr. Hassan's expression remained clinically neutral. Commander, are you familiar with Earth's history regarding invasive species? It seemed every human conversation eventually returned to their homeworld's brutal evolutionary history. Please enlighten me. When humans discovered new continents on Earth, we frequently encountered ecosystems that had evolved without certain predator species. These environments had developed delicate balances that were easily disrupted by the introduction of more aggressive organisms. Hassan activated her own data display, showing images of Earth's various continents. In many cases, invasive species would arrive and completely devastate local populations within decades. Entire branches of evolution would be eliminated because the native species had no defense against more aggressive newcomers. The parallel was obvious, but Zethkar waited for her to make the connection explicit. The devourers represent an invasive species in our galactic ecosystem, Hassan continued. They evolved in isolation and developed predatory behaviors that local species, including humanity, had no natural defenses against. Left unchecked, they would have eliminated not just human civilization but potentially all sentient life in this galaxy. So you eliminated them first. Exactly. We applied the same biological principles that governed evolution on Earth. When two species compete for the same ecological niche, only one survives. We made sure it was us. A communication alert interrupted their conversation. Major Williams activated the main communication channel, and the bridge filled with the voice of Colonel Martinez, commander of the ground operations. Indomitable, this is ground command. All sweep operations are complete. We've located and destroyed 17 additional egg chambers that weren't detected by orbital scans. Total confirmed elimination of all Devourer biological material on New Thessia. Captain Torres leaned forward in her command chair. Any signs of off-world Devourer presence? Escape pods, communication relays, anything that might have transmitted intelligence about our operations? Negative, Captain. Our electronic warfare teams intercepted and jammed all outgoing transmissions during the initial assault. As far as the greater Devourer collective knows, New Thessia simply went silent. They have no information about human capabilities or the methods used in the extermination. This was perhaps the most chilling aspect of the entire operation. The humans had not just eliminated a threat. They had done so in a way that left their enemies completely ignorant about human military capabilities. Any future Devourer incursions would be based on incomplete intelligence, giving humanity a massive tactical advantage. Excellent work, Colonel. Begin withdrawal operations. I want all human personnel off the surface within 6 hours. Copy that, Captain. Should we leave monitoring equipment to track potential regeneration? Negative. Implement Protocol Omega before departure. Zethkar had heard references to various human protocols throughout the operation, but this was a new one. What is Protocol Omega? It was Dr. Hassan who answered, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction that sent chills down Zethkar's spinal column. Complete atmospheric poisoning. We're going to introduce compounds into New Thessia's atmosphere that will make the planet uninhabitable for Devourer biology for the next several thousand years. You're destroying an entire world too. Ensure your enemy can never return. Not destroying, Hassan corrected. Sterilizing. The planet will recover eventually. In about 5,000 years, it will be capable of supporting human colonization. We're essentially claiming New Thessia for future expansion, while ensuring the Devourers can never use it as a breeding ground. The scope of human strategic thinking was breathtaking. They weren't just winning a battle or even a war. They were reshaping the galactic landscape to ensure their species' long-term survival and expansion. Ground teams are reporting successful deployment of atmospheric contaminants, Williams announced. New Thessia's air composition will be toxic to Devourer physiology within 18 hours. Contamination will persist for an estimated 4,000 to 6,000 years. Through the observation windows, Zethkar could see the last human dropships rising from the planet's surface, their hulls scarred from combat but their crews victorious. Behind them, New Thessia was already beginning to change. The sky was shifting from blue to a sickly green as human-engineered compounds spread through the atmosphere. Captain? Admiral Korethnos' voice crackled over the communication system. The Alliance fleet is prepared to depart the system. Our mission parameters have been exceeded. Torres smiled, the first genuine expression of pleasure Zethkar had seen from her during the entire operation. Copy that, Admiral. The human fleet will remain in system for another 12 hours to monitor the atmospheric conversion process, then we'll rejoin the main fleet. Understood, Captain. I must say the thoroughness of your operations has been educational. As the communication ended, Zethkar realized that he had witnessed something that would reshape galactic civilization. The Alliance had always operated under the assumption that military conflicts could be managed through superior technology and tactical precision. Humanity had just demonstrated that some conflicts required the complete and systematic elimination of one's enemies. Commander, Captain Torres addressed him directly. I suspect your report to the Vortanian High Command will be quite detailed. Yes, Captain. Though I'm not sure they'll believe half of what I've witnessed. That's probably for the best, Torres replied. The more uncertainty exists about human capabilities, the less likely other species are to test them. As the Indomitable began its final orbit around the dying world below, Zethkar understood that he was carrying more than just an intelligence report back to his people. He was carrying a warning that would echo through Vortanian military doctrine for generations to come. Humanity didn't just fight wars. They eliminated threats so completely that even the memory of those threats became a weapon against future enemies. The Devourers had learned this lesson too late to save themselves, but their extinction would serve as a textbook for any species considering hostile action against human space. The true horror wasn't what humanity had done to their enemies. The true horror was how efficiently they had done it, and how little remorse they showed for actions that other species would consider crimes against nature itself. 3 months after the New Thessia incident, Zethkar found himself in an unexpected position. The Vortanian High Command had not only believed his report, they had promoted him to the rank of Strategic Intelligence Coordinator and assigned him as permanent liaison to human military operations. His mission was simple: study humanity's warfare methods and determine how the Alliance could adapt their strategies for future conflicts. What he discovered was far more disturbing than even the extermination of the Devourers had suggested. The headquarters of human military intelligence on Luna Station was a maze of interconnected facilities buried deep beneath the moon's surface. As Zethkar toured the complex with General Patricia Reynolds, the commanding officer of Human Special Operations, he began to understand that New Thessia had not been an aberration. It had been standard procedure. "Commander, I want to show you something that might help put recent events in perspective," General Reynolds said as they entered a secured archive chamber. The walls were lined with holographic displays showing detailed records of human military operations dating back to their planet's Stone Age. "This is our strategic database," Reynolds explained. "Every significant conflict in human history, analyzed and categorized by tactical approach, enemy capabilities, and outcome effectiveness. What you witnessed at New Thessia represents the culmination of approximately 50,000 years of warfare evolution." The displays showed a progression that made Zethkar's blood run cold. Early human conflicts had indeed been limited to small-scale territorial disputes, but as human civilization developed, their military thinking had evolved along disturbing lines. "Here," Reynolds pointed to a display showing Earth's ancient history, "you can see the development of what we call total war doctrine, the complete mobilization of society's resources to eliminate enemy populations rather than simply defeating their military forces." Images flashed across the displays: burning cities, salted fields, entire populations displaced or eliminated. What struck Zethkar was the systematic nature of the destruction. Humans didn't just defeat their enemies, they erased them from history. The Carthaginian Empire, Reynolds continued, highlighting one particular conflict. Rome didn't just conquer Carthage. They demolished every building, enslaved the entire population, and spread salt across the farmland to ensure nothing could grow there for generations. Complete elimination of a civilization as a strategic goal. "But surely," Zethkar protested, "that was primitive behavior from humanity's early development. Modern humans have evolved beyond such thoroughness." General Reynolds smiled, and the expression carried the same predatory quality Zethkar had learned to associate with human military thinking. "Commander, let me show you something more recent." The display shifted to show conflicts from humanity's space age. World War III, the Martian Independence War, the corporate conflicts of the 2300s. In every case, human forces had employed increasingly sophisticated methods of ensuring their enemies could never threaten them again. "The pattern remains consistent," Reynolds explained. "We've simply become more efficient. Instead of salting fields, we engineer atmospheric contaminants. Instead of enslaving populations, we eliminate them entirely using biological weapons. The goal hasn't changed, only the tools have improved." They paused before a display showing recent human conflicts with other spacefaring species. The Zelian hegemony, the Vorgath collective, the synthetic rebellion, every war ended the same way. Complete and total elimination of the enemy's ability to pose future threats. "The Zelians developed psychic weaponry that could drive human crews insane," Reynolds said, indicating one of the displays. "So we created psi-dampening fields and then hunted down every Zelian with psychic abilities. Not just the military psionics, all of them. An entire subspecies of Zelian evolution eliminated in 6 months. The Vorgath collective tried to outbreed us by using rapid cloning technology," she continued. "We responded by engineering a virus that targeted their cloning facilities specifically. The virus spread through their entire reproductive infrastructure and rendered them biologically incapable of artificial reproduction. Each example was worse than the last. Humanity didn't just defeat their enemies, they identified the specific capabilities that made those enemies dangerous and systematically eliminated those capabilities from the universe. But the Alliance Council must have objected to these methods, Zethkar said desperately. Surely other species have raised concerns about human warfare doctrine. Oh, they have, Reynolds replied. Which brings us to the most important lesson from the new Thessia operation. She activated a new display showing current Alliance military deployments. Zethkar was stunned to realize that human forces now comprise less than 8% of Alliance military strength. Yet they were assigned to lead operations against every major threat the Alliance faced. The other species are terrified of us, Reynolds said matter-of-factly, but they're even more terrified of the threats we face. So they let us handle the dirty work while maintaining plausible deniability about our methods. The implications hit Zethkar like a physical blow. The Alliance wasn't horrified by human warfare methods. They were dependent on them. Every species in the galactic community tacitly accepted human brutality because it protected them from having to develop similar capabilities themselves. You've made yourselves indispensable by becoming the galaxy's exterminators, and they whispered, exactly. And that brings us to your real assignment, Commander. Reynolds led him to a new section of the archive, one that required additional security clearances. The displays here showed something that made Zethkar's secondary heart stop beating. Detailed intelligence files on every species in the Alliance, not just military capabilities, but biological weaknesses, psychological profiles, cultural vulnerabilities, and theoretical extinction scenarios. We maintain complete strategic assessments on all our allies, Reynolds explained casually, not because we plan to attack them, but because we need to understand how to defend them effectively. Or, if necessary, how to eliminate them efficiently. The files were comprehensive beyond anything Zethkar had imagined. Human intelligence services had identified specific biological agents that could target Vortanian physiology, psychological warfare techniques effective against Altarian group consciousness, and technological vulnerabilities in Thorgrim defensive systems. This is why your High Command assigned you to study our methods, Reynolds continued. They want to understand how we think, how we plan, how we make decisions about which threats require complete elimination versus simple containment. She paused before a display showing theoretical scenarios for conflicts between humanity and various Alliance species. They're hoping to develop countermeasures in case we ever decide they represent a threat to human survival. The brutal honesty of it was staggering. The humans knew that their allies were studying them, and they were freely sharing information that revealed the depth of their strategic planning. But why show me this? Zethkar asked. Surely this information compromises your operational security. Because we want you to take this information back to your people, Reynolds replied. We want every species in the Alliance to understand exactly how thoroughly we've analyzed their weaknesses. It's the most effective deterrent we can provide. The psychological warfare aspect was brilliant in its simplicity. By revealing the extent of their intelligence capabilities, humans ensured that no Alliance species would ever seriously consider hostile action. The knowledge that humanity had already developed detailed plans for their extinction was more effective than any military threat. There's one more thing I need to show you, Reynolds said, leading him to a final display. Our current threat assessment database. The holographic interface showed a constantly updating matrix of potential threats to human civilization, known hostile species, emerging technological dangers, resource competition scenarios, and theoretical extinction events. At the top of the list, marked with priority indicators that pulsed red, was a single entry. Galactic Alliance fragmentation scenarios. We've identified 47 different ways the Alliance could collapse into factional warfare, Reynolds explained. Each scenario includes detailed response protocols for ensuring human survival and expansion, regardless of which factions emerge victorious. Zethkar stared at the display in growing horror. You're planning for the Alliance's destruction. We're planning for every possibility, Reynolds corrected, including scenarios where we have to choose between human survival and Alliance preservation. In every case, human survival takes priority. The tour concluded in Reynolds's private office, where she offered Zethkar a seat and activated privacy shields that would prevent any surveillance of their conversation. Commander, I want you to understand something about humanity that your intelligence services have probably missed, she said seriously. We don't see ourselves as part of galactic civilization. We see ourselves as humanity surrounded by potential threats that happen to be useful allies for now. The words hung in the air like a death sentence for galactic peace. Every friendship, every alliance, every cooperative agreement is conditional on the other party continuing to serve human interests. The moment any species becomes a threat to human survival, we will eliminate them as efficiently as we eliminated the Devourers. Reynolds leaned back in her chair, studying Zethkar's reaction. The question your people need to answer is simple. Do you want to remain useful allies, or do you want to discover what it's like to be considered a threat? 6 months later, Zethkar stood before the assembled delegates of the Galactic Alliance Council, preparing to deliver what would become known as the Human Question Report. The Grand Chamber on Nexus Prime had hosted thousands of diplomatic sessions over the centuries, but none quite like this one. Every species in the Alliance had sent their highest-ranking officials, and the air hummed with tension that transcended language barriers. Honored delegates, Zethkar began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber through universal translators. I stand before you today to present findings that will fundamentally alter our understanding of humanity's role in galactic civilization. The report he was about to deliver had been classified at the highest levels for months while Alliance intelligence services verified its contents. What they had discovered had shaken the foundations of galactic diplomacy. During my assignment as liaison to human military operations, I witnessed the complete extinction of the Devourer species on New Thessia, but more significantly, I gained unprecedented access to human strategic planning facilities and archives. What I learned there forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about our alliance. Zethkar activated the central holographic display, showing a detailed map of Alliance space. Red zones marked areas of human military influence, which covered nearly 40% of Alliance territory despite humans, comprising less than 3% of the total population. Humanity does not view itself as one species among many in a cooperative galactic community, he continued. They view themselves as the apex predator in an ecosystem where every other species exists at their sufferance. Gasps and chittering sounds of dismay echoed through the chamber. The Altarian delegation's bioluminescent patches flickered in patterns indicating extreme agitation, while the Thorgrim representatives growled in their throat language that suggested barely controlled anger. The evidence I will present today demonstrates that humanity has developed detailed extinction protocols for every member species of the Alliance. These are not defensive contingency plans, they are comprehensive strategies for the complete elimination of our civilizations, should humans determine that we pose a threat to their survival. Ambassador Veltar of the Serenity, Collective rose from her delegation's floating platform. Commander Zethkar, these are extremely serious accusations. Do you have concrete evidence to support these claims? Zethkar nodded grimly and activated a new display showing excerpts from human strategic databases. The chamber fell silent as delegates read plans for biological warfare against their own species, psychological operations designed to collapse their governments, and technological attacks targeting their most critical infrastructure. The humans call it contingency planning for species-level threats, Zethkar explained. They have identified specific biological agents that could eliminate Vortanian physiology, developed viruses that target Altarian group consciousness, and created electromagnetic weapons designed to disable Thorgrim cybernetic implants. The Thorgrim delegation erupted in metallic roars of outrage. General Korgan Thul, their military representative, stood with his augmented limbs sparking with electrical discharge. This is an act of war. To plan for genocide against Alliance members is exactly what they did to the Devourers, Zethkar interrupted, and it worked perfectly. The question we must ask ourselves is not whether humans are planning for our potential elimination. They clearly are. The question is what we do with this knowledge. Supreme Chancellor Nethosa of the High Council stepped forward, her ancient form radiating the authority of someone who had guided galactic diplomacy for centuries. Commander, what do you recommend? This was the moment Zethkar had been dreading. The answer he was about to give would either preserve galactic peace or ignite the largest war in recorded history. I recommend we do nothing. The chamber exploded in chaos. Delegates from dozens of species rose to their feet, shouting protests and demands for explanation. It took several minutes for Chancellor Nethosa to restore order. "Explain your reasoning, Commander," she said once the tumult subsided. Zethkar took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would shape the future of galactic civilization. Because the alternative to accepting human dominance is experiencing human warfare, and after witnessing what they did to the Devourers, I can state with absolute certainty that no species in this alliance could survive that experience. He activated a new display showing casualty projections for various scenarios involving human military action against alliance members. The numbers were staggering. Human warfare doctrine is based on the complete elimination of threats rather than military victory, he continued. They don't seek to defeat enemy armies. They seek to eliminate enemy species. If we force a confrontation with humanity, the result will not be a war. It will be systematic genocide conducted with industrial efficiency. Ambassador Krelthon of the Synthetic Collective activated his vocal processors. "Are you suggesting we submit to human hegemony out of fear?" "I'm suggesting we acknowledge reality," Zethkar replied. "Humanity has become the dominant military force in the galaxy, not through superior numbers or technology, but through their willingness to employ methods that other species consider unthinkable. They are apex predators operating in an ecosystem of prey animals." The harsh truth of his words settled over the chamber like a funeral shroud. Every delegate present understood the implications, even if they were reluctant to admit them. "But there is another perspective to consider," Zethkar continued, shifting to a more hopeful tone. "Human dominance has brought unprecedented peace and security to Alliance space. The Krellian Horde, the Synthetic Rebellion, the Ethereal Dominion. Every major threat to galactic civilization has been eliminated or contained through human intervention." He activated a display showing territorial maps spanning the last century. The expansion of peaceful, prosperous space directly correlated with areas under human protection. Humanity has made itself indispensable by becoming our guardians against existential threats. Yes, they maintain extinction protocols for every Alliance species, but they also maintain protection protocols. As long as we remain valuable allies rather than potential threats, human military power serves our interests. Chancellor Nethosa studied the data for several minutes before speaking. "What you're describing is not an alliance in the traditional sense. It's a protection arrangement where humanity serves as our military proxy in exchange for what exactly? Resources, territory, and the knowledge that they are the undisputed apex species in galactic civilization," Zethkar replied. "Humans don't want to rule other species directly. That would be inefficient. They want to ensure that other species never develop the capability to threaten human survival." The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed the implications. They were not partners in a galactic democracy. They were protected species in a human-dominated ecosystem. "There is one final consideration," Zethkar said, activating his last display. "Recent intelligence suggests that humanity has detected signs of extragalactic threats. Species or entities from beyond our galaxy that pose potential risks to all life here." The display showed deep space sensor readings indicating massive structures moving in the void between galaxies. Whatever they were, they dwarfed anything in known space. "If these threats materialize, we will need humanity's unique approach to warfare," Zethkar concluded. "The methods that horrify us when applied to Devourers may be the only things that can protect us from whatever is coming." Chancellor Nethosa called for a recess to allow delegations to consult with their home governments. As the chamber emptied, she approached Zethkar privately. "Commander, speaking unofficially, what is your personal assessment of humanity's long-term intentions?" Zethkar considered his words carefully. "I believe humans genuinely want galactic peace and prosperity, but their definition of peace is the complete absence of threats to human survival. If that requires the extinction of hostile species, they will pursue extinction without hesitation or remorse. And if it requires the subordination of allied species, then we will be subordinated," Zethkar replied simply. "The only choice we have is whether that subordination occurs through voluntary cooperation or forced compliance." 3 days later, the Alliance Council voted to formalize what became known as the Terran Protection Protocols. Officially, it was a military cooperation agreement that recognized human forces as the Alliance's primary defense against existential threats. Unofficially, it was a surrender treaty that acknowledged humanity's position as the galaxy's dominant species. As Zethkar watched the final vote tally, he reflected on the irony of the situation. The Alliance had achieved perfect peace and security by accepting their position as protected species under human guardianship. They would never again face existential threats from hostile civilizations. They would also never again be truly free. But as the reports of extragalactic entities continued to arrive from Deep Space Monitory stations, Zethkar found himself grateful for humanity's protective dominance. Whatever was coming from beyond the galaxy, they would face it with the most ruthlessly efficient military force in known history standing guard. The true horror he had faced when joining humans in battle was not their capacity for violence. It was the realization that such violence might be the only thing standing between galactic civilization and complete annihilation. In the end, perhaps being prey animals under the protection of apex predators was preferable to being prey animals with no protection at all.